And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get 2 gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 329. Today's episode is all about the invisible burden of overthinking, its impact on self-worth, and how to honor your feelings.
Your brain is a machine that is designed, it's neurobiologically designed to take in environmental input. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, the brain calibrates itself. It learns. People who want fancy language, the reason it's neuroplastic is because of inputs from the external environment. So here's the part that I'm on fire for. And I just think it's such a big moment because we can see how much freedom we actually have. If I start to overfunction and then I live to see another day, my brain goes, you see, Julia, the reason you made it through to live another day is because you stayed up till 2 a.m., you didn't say no to anybody, and you brought 50 sandwiches.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. Do you ever catch yourself in a cycle of overthinking and overanalyzing your every move, every word, and every decision until it exhausts you? Maybe it's a decision at work or something you said to a friend that felt off, and you just can't stop replaying the entire situation over and over in your head. I get it. The funny thing is, I always thought I was laid back and that I didn't let things bother me. Then I stopped drinking. Okay, I had this tendency even when I was drinking, but it just came up in different areas of my life. For some people, it's the regret or second-guessing themselves. For others, it's everything, which can lead to a very anxious life. And for others, maybe it just looks like not stepping out of your comfort zone at all because you talk yourself out of it before you can actually get to the thing. Whatever your version of this, it's like an invisible burden that we carry, and it affects more than just that one situation. It actually takes a toll on your peace of mind, obviously, but also your self-worth. The thing is, our emotions and how we deal with them, how we honor them or don't, can dictate the quality of our entire lives. If you ignore your feelings or continuously seek external validation, you'll start chipping away at your own sense of worth. You end up feeling like you're not enough, like you're missing something. Want an example? I used to be amazing at directions until Google Maps. Now I travel 3 miles and I'm putting in that address. Sure, I know how to get there, but what if there's traffic or an accident that can be avoided? And yes, I can argue for that perspective and maybe even win that argument, but what am I losing? When I constantly rely on something external, what internal skills and muscles are wasting away? Use it or lose it, right? Well, here's the kicker. Every time you doubt your gut, every time you shrug off your own feelings for someone else's opinion, you're sending yourself a pretty crappy message. It's like telling yourself, hey, I can't trust me. I'm not the boss of my own life. My feelings, they're probably just overreactions or nonsense. But the truth is, our emotions are always speaking to us. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that going off the deep end with rage or snapping at people left and right is the way to go. That is not the point. Reactions are not to be confused with emotions. What I am saying is this. Even those not so great emotional outbursts, the ones that we're not proud of, they're trying to tell us something. And it's usually not the story our ego is busy spinning. It's something deeper, something more real. But here's the catch. You can't get to that deep, meaningful stuff if you're always reacting right off the cuff, if you're skimming the surface. When we muster up the courage to really tap into our own inner authority, our own power, it's a game changer. It's like flipping a switch. Suddenly you're not just reacting, you're understanding, you're in control. And that is where the magic happens. This episode isn't just for those who feel the weight of overthinking and emotional turmoil. It's for anyone who's ever been caught in the cycle of approval seeking, the comparison trap, or the unconscious belief that someone else's validation will fill our insecurities. Because here's the thing. We hold the power to change that. We have the ability to rewrite the scripts that we've internalized and transform the way we show up in the world. So today we're going to learn how to honor our feelings and rewire our energy patterns. Our guest is Julia DeGangeli. She's a neuropsychologist and clinical psychologist, specializing in studying painful emotions like anxiety, stress, fear, and anger. She comes from a whole lineage of psychologists, so she's always been passionate about understanding emotions and how they evolve over time. Her research involves using fMRI and EEG techniques to gain insights into the brain. Her work highlights the importance of emotional intelligence, authenticity, empathy, and addressing emotional pain like anxiety and exclusion. So 3 key things we will learn are the connection between emotions, self-worth, and the stories we tell ourselves. What happens when you prioritize psychological safety but neglect the danger you may be causing yourself? And the surprising link between your dream goals and your deepest emotions, and how harnessing this connection can unlock your true potential. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Can we talk about how overwhelming wellness advice has become? Cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes, morning routines. It just feels like there's advice for everything these days. But how do you know what actually works for you? I've been down that rabbit hole, trying every new trend, buying every new course, following every guru, and it is exhausting. And honestly, a lot of it just added more noise to my life. With all the information overload about mental health and wellness, it can be a real struggle to know what's true and what actions to take. That's where talking to actual professionals comes in. Therapy helps you cut through all that noise and figure out what you actually need, not what some influencer is selling, but what works for your specific situation. It can teach you how to set boundaries, trust your own judgment, and be the best version of yourself. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They have a rating of 4.9 from 1.7 million reviews, and you can join a session at the click of a button and switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. Instead of drowning in generic advice, you get personalized recommendations from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Can we talk about back to school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. I've hired a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you the biggest mistake that most business owners make. They think posting a job and waiting is a strategy, but it is not. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so that you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring so fast because the best candidates are already there, actively looking. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. And now let's welcome Julia DeGangi to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I've been loving diving in your book, and I'm curious, what inspired your research and your book on emotional power?
That's a wonderful question. So first of all, I think in the more short term, I'm a neuropsychologist, which means I'm a clinical psychologist with specialized expertise in the brain. And my area of research, I've done a lot of fMRI, EEG, all kinds of different psychological research, has really focused on painful emotions. So anxiety, stress, fear, anger. But I think even more fundamentally, I should tell you that I come from a lineage of psychologists. So my father is a psychologist. So the idea of thinking about emotion has been, I think, quite literally hardwired into my DNA. So I've really just been sort of thinking about people's emotions since I've been alive. And it's been really profound to watch how the conversation on emotion, emotional intelligence, these things like authenticity, empathy, even emotional pain. So things like anxiety, fear, exclusion have sort of evolved over time.
What is the most useful and scientifically accurate way to think about emotions?
So that's an awesome question. So first of all, my book is called Energy Rising. And so when I talk about emotions being an energy, I don't mean this metaphysically. I don't even mean it metaphorically. I mean, quite literally, your emotions are neurologic zings of energy that are communicating through your nervous system and then driving your behavior. But a sort of a more useful heuristic for understanding emotions is, and I think this is so clarifying for people, is emotions are the Google Maps of your life. So if you really think about it, your emotions are these signals that are trying to quite literally intelligently tell you how to drive your behavior, right? So what's happening is, if we're kind of like thinking about this metaphor, is we're like driving along and our emotions are like zing, zing, zing. At the next intersection, turn right and immediately leave the relationship. And then what do? We just like barrel through the intersection, or we go left, or our emotions are saying, "Dear Julia, at the next off-ramp, please leave this job. At the next off-ramp, please leave the job." And then what do? We just keep ignoring these neurobiological messengers. Now, our biology is really quite resilient. So we ignore that signal 1 time, 10 times, a couple hundred times. there's no problem. But if we are really honest about what's going on in our lives, we are disregarding this incredibly powerful neurobiological system that's evolved over 200 million years chronically. So, when people come to work with me, as a neuropsychologist, I treat patients. I also do a lot of work coaching. So I work in all kinds of human systems, in homes and relationships and parenting. What they're effectively asking me, and people might use different words, but what they're effectively asking is, how do I be well? How do I make my relationship work? How do I make my relationship with my kids work? How do I make my team work? In other words, like, how can we be satisfied and happy? So if you think about this from a brain basis, and I think the brain is such a clarifying instrument for how we should live our lives, what's happening to a lot of us is we have an emotional engine, and we have a behavioral engine. Now, if I was going to make a car, Melissa, and I was like, hey, I got a great idea. I'm going to superpower this car. I'm going to put 2 engines on this baby, except I'm going to have one engine that constantly goes forward, and then I'm going to have another engine that constantly drives backward. You would be like, I don't know what you are, but you're clearly not like a freaking auto engineer, because that's a horrible idea. You're canceling all the movement out. Except this is how a lot of us live our lives. We are quite literally consistently feeling in one direction, which again is a neurobiological energy source. And then at the exact same time, we are using the energy of our behavioral system to go in the exact opposite direction. I call this in my book and in my work, the pain of self-division. So let me just give you a few examples that will make this really clear for your listeners. So I feel exhausted. I feel depleted. I feel like I need rest. What do? I overwork. I overfunction. I overgive. I feel like I want to speak up. I want to have a difficult conversation. I want to start a podcast. I want to create something. So I feel like expressing myself. What do? I use my energy of behavior to keep my mouth shut. I feel like it's time for me to really start honoring my boundaries. I really am going to start saying no more often. Great. Except when push comes to shove and it's time for the behavioral engine to kick in, what does my behavior do? My behavior says yes. Do you see how in each of those examples that I think we can all relate to, we have quite literally divided one part of our energy from another part of our energy? Yes? Mm-hmm. Now, people will love to say, oh, emotions are so confusing. I don't know why I feel so bad. I don't know why I feel so exhausted. I love having these conversations because it actually gets to be very, very simple. If you're consistently dividing the energy of your feelings from the energy of your behaving, the consequence is going to be very logical. You will feel depleted. You will feel like you're lacking vitality. You will feel like you're waking up every day looking around going, is this all there is to life? And at the extreme, we feel anxious and we feel depressed.
It seems like the way most people navigate their lives, they don't really look at emotions as their guidance. And you mentioned emotional intelligence before. Based on how the brain works, what do you consider real emotional intelligence? It seems like the way most people navigate their lives, they don't really look at emotions as their guidance. And you mentioned emotional intelligence before. Based on how the brain works, what do you consider real emotional intelligence?
Oh, I think emotional intelligence, again, I like to really simplify things. I believe that clarity is the foundation of all power. Emotional intelligence is simply thinking well about our emotions. So if I'm thinking well about my emotions and I'm like, This is the 20th time I really wanted to have a difficult conversation with my spouse, or this is the 20th time I really wanted to change careers and I don't. I'm not thinking well about my emotions, right? So again, we know in neuroscience that the most powerful, the healthiest brain is an integrated brain, a brain that sort of uses the thinking system, so to speak, to pay attention to the feeling system, and a feeling system to pay attention to the thinking system, right? So these are sort of all ways that we interact with the world. So emotional intelligence is just, do I think well about the way I feel?
And so that would include not judging yourself for having those emotions as well, I'm assuming.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. So the whole thing about judgment is it's really, everything we do has an emotional, I call it like an emotional frequency, right? So you know how you can, if we turned on the radio right now, we could tune into 101.9, or we could tune into 99.9, or we could tune into 101.3. So there's all of these sort of possibilities around us. Whenever we engage in the behavior of judgment, there's always an emotional energy that underpins that. Does that make sense the way I'm describing this so far?
Yes.
So, whenever I'm engaging in the behavior of judgment, the emotional energy is always the energy of humiliation. Now, I don't care if you say shame or inadequacy or unworthiness, neurologically, these things are all the same. Okay. So, nothing is going to shut down our nervous system more than feeling ashamed or feeling humiliated. So again, I am I'm a neuropsychologist. I've worked extensively in science. I tend to take a really scientific bent to human problems. And by scientific, I don't mean incredibly academic and complex. I mean, let's just take judgment out of it, get really curious and say, why am I behaving in a way that doesn't feel good to me? So if I start to not, if I'm behaving in a way, so say for example, like I'm exhausted, or I keep avoiding a difficult conversation. And so there's sort of the low hanging fruit is for me to be like, I'm not courageous enough. Like I'm just a doormat. People can walk all over me, right? But the more powerful conversation is to be emotionally intelligent and say, let me get curious and think well about why I'm behaving so avoidantly. The only way to open ourselves up is to calm the nervous system down enough so it allows us in to deeper levels of consciousness. I mean, if you think about like a defensive posture, right? You can imagine it like just think about animals. Like they hunch over, they armor up, they put all their little prickles up. So there's really no way to get into the very systems that are sort of we want to have access to. So again, I think this idea of how do we behave in emotionally intelligent ways, we kind of understand what levers to pull to change behavior to get what we want.
That makes a lot of sense because in my mind, I was thinking, yes, we use emotions as guidance, but there are certain times where I see that where I'm like, okay, why do I not want to make this call? But I also know that call is necessary for my next level or for the thing that I want to get. And so asking yourself, rather than being like, oh my gosh, like this is steering me away, I shouldn't make this call, it's more like, what is that? And that question itself invites me to take a deeper look at some of my emotional blocks so that I can learn how to break through them to get to that next level, because otherwise it's still that sort of hidden emotional block. Am I understanding?
Absolutely. So, what's really interesting is I think this is true of anything, is the more you know about the thing, the more you appreciate nuance. So starting on Wednesday, I'm running this program and the program is called The Deepening. And a lot of times what happens is we don't make changes in our lives, not because we don't want the change enough, right? It's like, I also think that this is kind of a sort of a funny conversation. It's like people don't get what they want in their lives. And then we self-talk like, oh, we're not motivated enough. We're not accountable enough. We're not hungry enough. We're not committed enough. I don't know about you, but I think most of us really want the things we want. So it's not that we're not hungry enough or we don't want it enough. What it really is that we haven't gone deep enough. So when we're thinking about change, we really need to think about depth. Okay. So as we deepen our emotional intelligence, we really start to become expert operators. So, it always sort of, depending on my mood, either tickles me or kind of frustrates me. Like, we pay more attention on how to operate our cell phones or chat GPT than we pay to the intelligent operation of our own nervous system. So we now have the neuroscience, this is sort of what I've dedicated my life to as a neuropsychologist. Like, we have powerful, actionable insights on how to work with the brain and behavior to really achieve the changes that we want in our lives, in our homes, in our relationships, in our business. So I want to go back to what you said about thinking. Emotional intelligence does not mean let me think and 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 think about emotion, right? So when we talk about thinking, I talk a lot about the difference between what I call productive processing and then pathological perseveration. So a lot of times what a lot of us will do, and I think this will probably resonate with a lot of your listeners, is we say we're thinking about the thing. I'm really just trying to get curious to understand why I haven't done X. Or I just need to think a little bit more about the strategy for Y. Or, yes. But what happens is sometimes if we don't understand the way the brain is actually working, is we get into this stuff called the overs. So see if you recognize any of these. We start overthinking. We start overgiving. We start over-explaining. We start over-communicating, over-engineering, over-functioning, over-rotating. So anytime we're in what I call the overs, it's actually an avoidance response. There is a galactic difference between thinking and overthinking. There is a galactic difference between giving and overgiving. Well, what is the difference? The difference, again, is the energy of emotion. If I bring you a cup of coffee, Melissa, and it comes from the true energy of giving, I'm going to feel spacious. I'm going to feel open. I'm going to feel abundant. I'm going to feel connected. I'm going to feel confident. If I give you this same cup of coffee, the coffee hasn't changed at all, but I'm over giving, I'm doing it out of fear. I'm doing it out of stress. I'm doing it out of desperation. So do you again see how it's like it's the energy of our emotions that give rise to the entire meaning of our lives. The most existential questions of our lives, right? Are you a good person? Have you been successful enough? I don't know. How do you feel about it? Are you a good mother? I don't know. How do you feel about it? Two of the ones that I help clients with all the time is their relationship with time and money. So time and money seem like they have these external value. They're entirely mediated by the emotional system. In other words, time and money are about value, and value is mediated by emotion. Is $100 a lot of money? It depends on how you feel about it. I was just working with a client. I told the story earlier today. I was working with a really senior leadership client, and this person got for what for most of us would be in a absurdly large bonus. So they got a $300,000 bonus. And they were crying in the call saying when the money hit, they felt good for about 24 hours. But by the 25th hour, they were already thinking it wasn't enough. That they had to grind again, that they had to hustle more. Now, a lot of us might think like I would totally be set if I had $300,000 drop into my bank account on any single day. But what I'm saying is that's not true. It could be true, but it totally depends on your emotional response to scarcity and abundance and deprivation and possibility. So it's really when we learn how to work deeply with our emotions that our entire relationship with our lives change.
Which is why so many people that win the lottery end up in the exact same place.
Correct.
Just soon after.
Correct. Because a lot of times what happens, and I see this all the time, is we look for situational fixes. I call this situational specifics. So if you would just stop talking to me like that, if they would just stop doing X, if I could just get a new house, if I could just change my job. Another big one that's happening is the new year is coming, right? So, well, finally, when the calendar changes, I'm going to be different. Well, I'm certainly in the business of human change. I believe profoundly in the human capacity and the brain's capacity for change, right? We know this anecdotally. More importantly, I think we have a ton of evidence to substantiate this. But the change entirely depends on how I'm willing to work with emotions, and even more specifically, the emotions that I've historically avoided feeling. So the reason that I wrote Energy Rising is really there's a simple premise. And I think it's such a life-giving, healing premise. Every single thing that we want in this lifetime that we still have not achieved, every single thing is on the other side of the feelings we are telling ourselves repeatedly we cannot feel. So the thing that people want most in this lifetime is never situation, it's emotion. The reason you want a new house is because it makes you feel fill in the blank. It makes you feel more organized. It makes you feel more happy. It makes you feel, right? The reason you want a promotion is it makes you feel something. The reason you want, I have this phone and it's the only people that ever call me are bots. So sorry, a bot just called. So my point here is like we need to really sort of work at the level of the energy of our emotion in order to drive any of the change that we ultimately want to feel.
You started this conversation with an example around listening to the guidance that your emotions give. And it's like you keep feeling this emotion and it's telling you to leave the relationship, but you stay. In that situation, or the job situation, whatever it is, how do you know when your emotions are telling you to leave versus stay and fix it, work on yourself, work on the relationship? Like, when is a relationship toxic, and can you even heal toxicity? How do you know when your emotions are telling you to leave versus stay and fix it, work on yourself, work on the relationship? Like, when is a relationship toxic, and can you even heal toxicity?
So there were, I feel like a couple of great questions in there. So is the first question, what makes a relationship toxic?
Yes.
Okay. So what makes a relationship toxic? So this is a beautiful, beautiful question. What makes a relationship toxic is two things. There's always has to be these two key ingredients. And they're both, again, very simple. So I hope people feel kind of like, I think a lot of times when we feel bad, it feels so overwhelming. It's like, oh God, just make it all make sense. None of it makes sense, right? That's what and I actually hope that we have time to talk about confusion, because I want to suggest to your listeners that people don't think about this. I would suggest to you that confusion is actually one of, if not the most hated emotion. So I think that surprises people. So anyways, to get back to what is a toxic relationship, the two elements are, it feels bad to me. I don't like the way I feel. I feel disrespected. I feel humiliated. I feel undervalued. I feel unseen. I mean, we could go on and on, right? But I don't feel good in my body. And the second piece, and this is a really, really important piece, is I feel disempowered. So I feel bad and there's nothing I can do about it. That's a really horrible combination, right? And we've all been there. It's like, I feel like shit and I'm stuck in it. Okay? But here's the thing, and I want people to just take a deep breath and just kind of relax and just listen to what I'm saying and take what resonates with you and leave, obviously, what doesn't. What I have found in my work, and I have found in my own life, is that when we think about all of my work really comes down, and I talk about this a lot in Energy Rising, to these ideas of emotional pain and emotional power. They're two sides of the same coin. When we think about the emotional pain in our lives, and by emotional pain, again, I mean anytime we feel bad, anxiety, fear, stress, rejection, doubt, none of these things feel good. If we're honest, they are always chronic. In other words, it's not the one day in 1997 when somebody said one thing I didn't like to me at my job. right? It is the same annoying conversation that we get into on social media for the nth time. It's the 100th or the 1,000th time we've had the same fight with our partner. It's the same bad feeling at dinner time every night, right? So if we're honest, there's always this chronicity to our emotional pain. So then we start to say to ourselves, well, I'm stuck here. I don't know why this keeps happening. I don't know why you keep talking to me like this. I don't know why you keep treating me like this. But here's the power play. All relationships, by the physics of a relationship, requires two people's participation. So if I am in a relationship that I have repeatedly determined, right? This isn't just like my husband made me once mad on a Wednesday. I on balance feel terrible here. What in the world am I doing? I actually think that this is such a hopeful and empowering moment. Because if it were to be true that there was nothing I could do here, then I would be up Schitt's Creek. But if I'm willing to say I have a tremendous amount of authority, in fact, I must be the most powerful actor in my own life. It doesn't mean that I'm the only actor. It doesn't mean other people, of course not. My fundamental area of expertise is trauma. So by definition of what trauma is, it means horrific things have been done unto us. Think about childhood, right? We didn't have much agency then. But I think it's this amazing moment of our emotional resurrection when we start to realize I am giving all of my holy energy to relational dynamics, to jobs, to conversations, to places I don't even want to be in. Now, I had mentioned to you that I'm sort of the daughter of psychologists, and I've watched the mental health conversation evolve over 40 years. And so it's been, I feel extraordinarily lucky to be alive at this moment in time. I think it's profound what's kind of happening. I think a lot of it is we're really deepening our emotional intelligence, in part because of the pandemic, and then also in part because of AI. So the machines have wildly outpaced us. And so now what's happening is we're being forced into a deeper relationship with our own emotions. So I think this is it's a complicated time, but I see a lot of potential. So there's been this rise, and I think this is a really important piece in these conversations around psychological safety. Well, this is amazing. There's not one shred of doubt in my mind, and we have a copious amount of evidence that the brain absolutely needs psychological safety to function well. This is not up for debate. So it's great. We should have more and more conversations about safety. But here's the piece that's missing a lot. How in the world is it going to matter if the entire world is safe to me, so long as I am willing to be dangerous to myself? I am the one that says my body is breaking down and I force myself to overwork. I am the one that says the way that you're talking to me is making my skin crawl. And I am sitting there again with my mouth shut. I am the one that's saying I'm getting so resentful for how much I'm doing for my kids, how much I'm doing for my community. I have lots of rage. And then I'll tell you a quick story. I got an email today from my kids' school, and I love my kids' school. I adore the community. But I got an email, and it asked me to do, so I'm the room parent, and my kids are in the same room, and so they're little, and so I'm the room parent. It's already hard for me to be the room parent. It's already like a lot of us, we have really busy lives, but I really wanted to make this commitment. And, I do all the things. So I get this email today that asked me to do something. And the initial reaction in my body was, I felt like a tightening on my neck. And I started to panic. I can't do this. I can't do this. It was, I just didn't feel good. And so I was like, I always say that I believe that the most profound mission of our life is to walk the work. So I'm here talking about emotional power. And I had to say to myself, hey, Julia, are you going to have an emotionally powerful moment or not? So I said, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. And I wrote back, and the email was it was a lovely email from a very lovely person. And it was very politely worded, but it was like, we need you to do this. And I said, I think this is the most beautiful idea. I would totally love to contribute. In fact, I'm willing to supply a lot of the food, but unfortunately, I'm unable to organize the event. I hope that you understand. I didn't go into lots of explanations about how sorry I was. I didn't go into how busy I was. I didn't go into how I just said, let me both respect them and also respect myself. And within, guess what? You know how like the brain's always like, they're going to hate you. They're going to kick your kids out of the school. Your kids are actually now walking home alone on a busy street. You know, like all the doomsday scenarios start going. She wrote me back in like 60 seconds and was like, absolutely no problem. Thanks for agreeing to buy the food. It was just the idea of coordinating 30 people I couldn't do it at this exact moment in time in my life.
So it sounds like, yes, we may have a terrible job or a terrible partner, and so it's damaging to stay in that situation. But the most damaging part is actually done to our self-esteem and our self-worth, because we are building a belief that we will not act on our own internal guidance in order to keep ourselves safe.
Correct. So then watch this. Here's what happens. Again, there's a real math to this. And once you see it, you're like, okay, I'm on to myself. And then this gets to be this profound sort of foundation for transformation. So let's go back to this idea of the overs. So I say, I'm tired. I've hit my limit. I want to hold boundaries. But instead of honoring what my emotional system is, and again, most of our emotional systems didn't just ping on Tuesday at 6 p.m. It's like, this has been a slow bleed for a lot. And we're like holding up the white flag, crying uncle. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, so now I still, instead of honoring my sacred biology, my sacred body, my sacred nervous system, I start all this shit with the overs, the overgiving, the overdoing, the overfunctioning, blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing. This is such a big moment. The thing that is making me feel like shit is actually my behavioral response to my ignoring my emotions. Do you see this? So my real problem is actually what I'm doing, how I am behaving against my emotions. In other words, I'm actually getting sick because I'm overworking. I'm actually getting enraged because I'm overfunctioning. I'm actually getting despairing because I'm overgiving. I'm over-communicating, right? If I would just, so let's go back to my example today. It's a really small example, but sometimes I think it helps to concretize. If I would have responded out of the overs and started to overfunction and overwork and overdeliver and overgive and say, I can take this thing on that I really am at capacity and I cannot. Instead of listening to my emotional system, my overfunctioning would have then been the thing that would have made me sick. So then I would say, this is the other piece, and I can kind of break this down again if I'm not explaining this clearly enough. I would live. So let's say I agreed to do the food thing at the school. Your brain is a machine that is designed, it's neurobiologically designed to take in environmental input. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, the brain calibrates itself. It learns. People who want fancy language, the reason it's neuroplastic is because of inputs from the external environment. So here's the part that I'm on fire for. And I just think it's such a big moment because we can see how much freedom we actually have. If I start to overfunction and then I live to see another day, my brain goes, you see, Julia, the reason you made it through to live another day is because you stayed up till 2 a.m., you didn't say no to anybody, and you brought 50 sandwiches. So then the very evidence that we're then using to say we made it to live another day, then the brain thinks, okay, well, of course your brain is in the business of survival most fundamentally. So if we want to change, we have to be willing to say, I am willing to act in the energy of faith. I'm willing to hold a new boundary. Now, this is sort of weird, I think, for some people to hear a scientist talk about the frequency of faith. Here's the thing. if scientists are really honest, we know how to work in the frequency of evidence, and we know how to work in the frequency of faith. Every single time a scientist starts an experiment, they have no idea. They have a hypothesis and they say, I hope this works. Or I'm curious what's going to happen. So what's very interesting to me is a lot of times we'll get so glommed onto evidence that we already know feels absolutely awful, because we feel that even though it's miserable, it's a misery we know we can survive, rather than to roll the dice in this energy of faith.
What I see a lot of people, especially women, do in a situation where their emotions are calling to them to take an action is they justify it to themselves by making their emotions wrong. Like, I'm too sensitive, or maybe it's the person telling them these things, like, you're crazy during this time of the month, or whatever it is. And so then 2 days later, when everything's good, because that's how toxicity tends to work, whether it's your job or your partner or whatever, and then they're doting over you, making you feel good, then you look back on that and you create a whole different story around it. What's the dangers of doing that? How does that affect our self-worth or our relationship with ourselves?
I mean, I think it affects our relationship with ourselves profoundly. I think the number one thing that people want on this planet is access to their own power. By power, I certainly don't mean like I'm the most powerful, everyone's going to listen to me. I mean, when I talk and I describe this at length in Energy Rising, emotional power is about our wholeness. It's about the idea that I am okay as I am. I am worthy as I am. I am powerful as I am. I am as I am. Almost all of our emotional pain, almost every single ounce of it, comes from contorting ourselves into some version of something somehow we believe other people want us to be. And if we're really honest, a lot of times, sometimes those are actually true, and sometimes they're hallucinations that we carry in our own brain that are usually holdovers from childhood, right? So these kind of adaptations that we made, 30 years ago are still playing out in real time. So I think the thing that we want more than anything on this planet, more than anything, you know who we want to trust more than our partner? Ourself. So if I have to choose between my relationship, my relationship is very sacred to me, just like I think I choose the relationship with myself. And the reason is, again, if you get really pragmatic, how could it possibly work? What a lot of us are doing is this podcast also video, or will it just be audio?
Audio.
Okay. I was going to hold it. So basically, if you can imagine like a cup, okay? And so there's no doubt here that a human being must feel worthy in order to be well. Okay. It's like just a base, just like we need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need a sense of worthiness. Now, we're all kind of like these little cups going through time and space, but what it means to be human is we all have cups in the bottom of our hole. Nobody has a perfectly intact cup, just because that's not what it means to be human, right? It's hard to be human. But some of us have lots and lots and lots of holes. Some of us have less holes, right? We can imagine there's kind of differences in the number of holes. Well, what happens to all of us, and we all have these moments, is when we start to get low on our water of worthiness, we look, for example, I'll just use our romantic partner, but you can see how this is what's happening on needing affirmation on social media, needing to get constant promotions, constantly being high achieving. You like get the hit and then you need some more, and you get the hit and you need some more, and you get the hit and you can't hold the water. So what a lot of us are doing, and I treat a lot of couples, I do a lot of work in family systems with the romantic couple. I do a lot of work with parent-child dynamics. So what happens is we say, oh shit, I'm running low on water. Here, give me your hand, dear partner, and plug up my holes. Well, the problem with this is it works in that moment so long as their hand's right there, as long as they're sitting next to me, as long as they want to watch the exact show I want to watch on Netflix, as long as their tone of voice is exactly what I need it to be, as long as they ask me the right questions, as long as they don't ask me the wrong questions, right? So the second they move their hand, I naturally start to panic. There's no flaw here. You should panic. In other words, if all of your water of worthiness is going to drain out, you got to do something about that. But a lot of us think we keep trying to get an external fix. I just need you to hold me the right way. I need you to speak to me the right way. I need you to. The problem with this, if we're really honest, and I think emotional power is about great, great wisdom. Why do we think our partners have less hole in their cups than we have on ours? In other words, they're kind of pulling for our hand too. And the way they pull is oftentimes very, very different. But we're asking from something from our partners that, number one, they can't even give themselves, and we're not even giving ourselves. You can see what a mess this is, right? So the work then is I can constantly be like, are you there for me? Are you there for me? Are you there for me? And in fact, the number one, I would love to talk to you. We're not going to have time today, but about anxiety. So that feeling of like, I need constant reassurance. That's all anxiety is. In other words, the best definition I can give you for anxiety is a disturbed relationship with certainty. It is a disturbed relationship. It's not about it has nothing to do with the situation before you. It has to do with your own relationship with certainty. I need you to tell me you love me again. No, again, no, again, no, again, no, again. So as long as I keep looking for the outside world to patch up my cup, it's not going to work. So I'll tell you a story. When I work with couples, they'll come in and they'll basically say what's fascinating is they almost always say the exact same thing. They say, you don't love and respect me enough. No, you don't love and respect me enough. That's pretty interesting right off the bat. Who's right? Okay. So I say, they'll start to tell all the examples. You talked to me this way, you didn't. Okay, go on. Great. But that's very valid. We should absolutely address that. I 100% believe that. So I say, we're going to get to that. But I have another question first. You just said that your partner does not love and respect you. We're going to get to that. First, though, I need you to tell me all the ways, I want you to list all the evidence that you profoundly love and respect yourself. I have yet to hear a good answer to that question. Our relationships are a reflection of our inner state because they are our inner state. We literally make up one half of that thing. And then if we expect our partner to plug up all of our bad holes, I don't think it's emotionally intelligent, not because our partners don't love us, not because they don't, but because they can't do it. Now, I also don't think when partners come to see me, I don't think that marriages should end, and I don't think that they should go on forever and ever. In other words, I think I said this earlier, I think the most powerful thing we can do on this planet is walk the wound. Plenty of us are in relationships where we learned an amazing, amazing, amazing amount about what our boundaries are and what we will no longer tolerate. And it's time for the relationship to end. Plenty of relationships should go on. I don't make that decision for people. But what I try to help people do is really understand from the most upstream place how to really become emotionally powerful.
I love to leave listeners with something actionable to focus on for the week to really ground all this into reality. And I know that you had mentioned like confusion is one of the worst pains. You said in your book that uncertainty can be more painful than physical pain. And that's where people get hung up because you're right. It's like, well, I know what this discomfort is, this relationship or this job or this situation is, but over there, it's going to take faith. Do you have an actionable way that people can get more comfortable with the uncertainty or building that, expanding their emotional power to kind of hold faith in higher regard for the step that they're going to take outside of their comfort zone?
Absolutely. I have like so many examples. I'm like, which one do I go with? And then, obviously, as you mentioned in Energy Rising, there's tons of examples and sort of practical things. What I wanted to say is I want to go back to this idea of reassurance seeking. So a great way to sort of strengthen our emotional power is to start, and again, in a totally non-judgmental way. Just totally relax. And in fact, I would encourage people, the goal is actively not to try to change behavior. So for like a week, 2 weeks, however long you need, Just observe yourself. I think a lot of times when we start to realize, we like panic and like want to change. So like, you don't have to put that much pressure on yourself. Just start looking every time you ask a question. Are you asking the question for information, or are you asking the question for reassurance? There is a galactic difference between information seeking and reassurance seeking. So for example, if I say to like my accountant, is this tax deductible? That would be information seeking because I have no idea. But if I say, if I start putting clothes in my Amazon cart and I call my friend and I say, hey, do you like this dress or this dress better? Why would it really matter? Again, not judging. I mean, just like from a scientific sort of like as a scientist, why am I asking that question? And I'll spoiler alert, it's because you're asking for permission. You're not even really asking for her permission, right? Because we've all had that thing where like, she'll be like, I like the green one. And you're like, well, I actually really like the purple one better. So you see how these things happen so quickly. They almost happen outside of our conscious awareness. So the first line of business is to start getting conscious about when I'm kind of using other people to hold my emotional power. A lot of times we will, I'll give you other examples too. It's like, so I'll work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of solopreneurs in particular. And a lot of times they will have an idea that they want to start, like, let's say they want to launch a program. And they have this like really clear, bold, beautiful vision. And instead of going out there and just staking their flag, they're kind of like testing the water and testing the water and testing the water. Well, the problem with testing the water and testing the water and testing the water is a lot of times when we test the water publicly, we don't seem like we're clear. It's a really noisy environment out there, right? So we only have so do you see how, because I didn't really trust myself enough to say, let this be true, I'm kind of reassurance seeking and reassurance seeking and reassurance seeking and reassurance seeking. And then the thing doesn't work. Well, did the idea not really work, or was my strategy kind of based on bad emotional energy? So I think if we can get clarity about like when we pretend like we're asking for information, but we're really asking for permission, this is a very transformative moment.
This must be the most passionate conversation I've ever had about emotions, and I could talk to you for a whole nother hour, so I'd love to have you on again. But for listeners that are resonating as much as I am, where can they find you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. So I would love to connect with people. I could talk about these ideas of emotions and relationships and the neuroscience of them for a million lifetimes. You can connect with me on my website, which is drjuliadegangi.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at drjulia.com. I'm on Facebook too at just Julia DeGangi, so not Dr. Julia DeGangi, and LinkedIn as well.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/329. Your challenge for this week is to observe your emotions. Again, the goal is not to change your behavior this time around. That can be a lot all at once. It reminds me of the writing and editing process. If you try to edit while you're writing, you just get in your head and you don't get anything done. Instead, just free flow. Well, the same with this. Just notice your emotions, your patterns of behavior, how you respond to things, how you react. Sometimes just by observing can change how you're reacting or showing up with somebody with a certain situation. And that's okay if it happens naturally, but that's not the aim. Once you honestly and rawly witness how you are showing up in the world, you start to realize your own power, the opportunity to transform. What I've been doing recently is just staying quiet more. And that might sound disempowering to some people, but it's not. The power is in the pause. I've been noticing that I have a story around every reaction. And that story is never, never, never the full truth. It might be pretty close to it, but arguing that side often doesn't get you anywhere. I was just sharing on Instagram today the opportunity in every moment of expanding or contracting. And this is so true in our emotional worlds as well. So often when we're triggered, we contract. And that looks like doubling down on our story, emphasizing our rightness, telling ourselves over and over and over again. But how often does that feel good? It's like that phrase, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And that's not to say that you bow down in everything so that you just kind of go with everybody else's whim. But that is to say, our ego is rarely 100% right. And so if we allow ourselves the space to choose differently, again, this doesn't mean to choose what the other person is trying to get us to choose or to bow down our wills in any way, but it might show you where you have opportunity to soften, where you have an opportunity to incorporate someone else's perspective, where you have an opportunity to see a bigger truth than the one that you're feeling into right now. I remember a long time ago, I did an episode on anxiety, and one of the NLP techniques was to, when you are in that narrow-minded, focused, angry pattern, just to bring your fingers out to the side and wiggle them so it activates your peripheral vision. Because so often when we're in those modes where I'm right, you're wrong, or whatever our triggered state tends to be, we get very narrow-minded and focused. And just expanding even our vision allows us to soften a little bit more. So these are so many things to try. But again, the challenge for this week is really just to bring awareness to your own energy patterns, to your own habits of reaction. Because in that awareness lies the opportunity to change. And let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. I am getting a lot more strategic on social media this year, so I'm going to be sharing a ton of things, and there's something big that's going to be launched on social as well. So be sure to follow me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. You can also find all of my amazing sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors with all of their incredible discount codes. I absolutely love each one of my sponsors. I am very picky. I vet them like crazy. I say no to a lot of people who come out and offer to sponsor Mind Love. So just know if it's on the show, I love it. And it's there for a reason. mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.